perspective. I think a more profound answer, or important answer, is that they've been internally attacked. Like that leadership has been critiqued in the name of anti-authoritarianism and democracy in the movements. One can run this genealogy, I would say, through a variety of different movements. You know, through, say, in the UTS context, through anti-racist movements, through student movements. For me, it's easiest to run it through the genealogy of feminist movements, where it in some ways seems clearest to me. I'm thinking from the 1960s and 70s onwards, with simple practices like consciousness raising or making sure that everyone speaks at meetings, insisting on democracy within the movements. That's what I'm considering as a kind of internal undermining of the role of centralized authority within the movements. It's interesting to me, maybe I'll do this. Okay, so those who lament the leadership, the decline of leadership in the US often point to African American politics as a counterexample about the successes due to charismatic leaders. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Stokely Carmichael, Huey Newton, etc. I'm interested in particular in that context how a minor line, a line of black feminist thought, questions that charismatic leader position. Let me just read you one, I think, representative sentence, and this is from a book by Erica Edwards called Charisma, you know, about this itself. And so she writes, the defiant deployment of charismatic leadership as a political wish, that is the lament that we have no leaders, and as a narrative explanatory mechanism, that is the telling of the story of black politics as the story of black leadership, is as politically dangerous as it is historically inaccurate. And it seemed to me a good summary for, and I'm sure you could come with your own histories of how it's distorting both the past about this story about leadership. Now, like I say, I don't think I'm saying anything particularly new to you with this, partly to give you context. But also as a distorting political wish. That's what I wanted. I wanted both of those from her. I would say that one of the important aspects of Black Lives Matter in its many different embodiments, you know, in different parts of the country and different institutions, is a manifestation of how developed the immune system of the movements is against leadership. So what I'm thinking of is consciously rejecting the charismatic male leadership model as undemocratic and ineffective, and rather than leaders, there are what I would think of as facilitators who sometimes choreograph action via social media. So rather than leadership in the traditional sense, and maybe rather than leadership as such, is that. So I would say, right, so that there's both a gender and a sexuality component to that critique of the charismatic figure. In saying that, I'm partly just trying to get something that I think was familiar to you. I'm not proposing Black Lives Matter as a new model, as the answer, but rather as a field of experimentation with new organizational forms. And moreover, as a recognition of the problem. I mean, the notion of the immune system, I guess I would say, whether we like it or not, I actually do like it. But whether you like it, or one likes it or not, the movements themselves have made that reproposition of an old style of leadership in a centralized, in form of a centralized authority, have made it no longer possible. That it will be, the immune system of the movements will attack that as soon as it comes about. So what I guess I'm saying, here's the summary of just this first proposition. I'm certainly in favor of or endorse critiques of authority and demands for democracy within the movements. But I think in that context, there's a false alternative that's been set up. On the one hand, I would say that today's horizontal movements, so-called leaderless movements, are not sufficient, and that too often the critique of leadership becomes confused with the refusal of organization and institution. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, I think it's useless to call for a return to old centralized forms of charismatic leaders, vanguard parties, or the like. But my point is, this is really the point of departure for me and Tony, my co-author. I hope you get used to me calling him like that. That those aren't our only choices. Yeah, in fact, let me just be clear in case it doesn't doesn't sink in right away is I'm not calling for, maybe this, I'm not calling for new leaders. I'm not saying that we need them. You remember, you might be with me with that. I don't know if any of you had, oh, this is Stuart's side. If any of you had the experience of teaching someone like Michel Foucault to undergraduates, and then you get these papers back thinking that he really likes discipline and thinks we ought to be more disciplined. So anyway, I want to just guard against you thinking that I'm saying okay, you're with me. So here's the maybe this is the big idea for the evening, something like that. So where this leaves us is that what Tony and I talk about think about, this is maybe a framework for starting to think about it, is the inversion of strategy and tactics. It's not really a solution, it's more like a framework for evaluating possibilities, a criterion for evaluation. So let me start then with strategy and tactics. Unfortunately, military terminology, but that's what the tradition